G'day. So, joining you today with co-host Matt Bangy. Matt, how you going?
Doing good. Ready to get into this.
Co-host, colleague. We both work at Operator, but we've been having some really cool chats lately, Matt. And I thought this one was quite cool and a bit topical. And so I thought, hey, why don't we jump on and just record this and share some thoughts? You come at this from a very different angle to me. If you don't know Matt, he is super smart and very technical, but also has some really interesting views on these things. So that's the whole reason we thought this would be a good chat, right, Matt?
Absolutely. We tend to get ourselves into some interesting non-technical topics that we always end up coming back to the impact of the world that we live in.
Indeed, we do. And speaking of the world that we live in right now, there is something going on that I think is quite topical, and that's where this sort of came from. I wrote an article about a week or so ago about two cars being parked in your driveway, and really it centers around the global fuel crisis and the situation that we're kind of going through right now. And it begs the question, what if your agents couldn't come in tomorrow? And we've kind of lived this before, right, Matt?
Yeah. I've actually gotten quite tired of the reference of COVID, but I think it's worth bringing it back up, not as a time that we are in, but a time that we've experienced as an industry and grown from.
Yeah. And maybe not grown from in some cases. I think with
Yeah.
COVID, a lot of people just, they had to do it. They were forced into the work from home situation. They scrambled, they got it sticky taped together, but never really thought of it as a long-term solution. And a lot of organizations, the second that the pandemic kind of released its grip, moved a lot of people back into the workplace. Whereas and we didn't really have a warning on that. Whereas I feel like this time around, this could potentially move to a situation where we have to work from home. And I feel like we're being given a bit of a lead up to this. We're actually got ourselves a bit of runway to make some decisions on this. But I referenced the fuel situation, not as like this doom and gloom kind of thing, but as just this is a real forcing function. Government's already starting to discuss work from home mandates in some markets. I know here in Australia, the gas stations, as you'd say in America, or the petrol stations here, a lot of them have run out of fuel. And so there's a lot of talk about how we do that. This week, the government announced free public transport to try and ease that pressure because fuel prices are through the roof. And even where they're not mandated, those fuel costs are shifting behavior. And because we did see this in contact centers when COVID came around and the industry scrambled, I think this is finally we're in a point where we could do this properly.
I think if we chose to, right, if we really bite in as an industry as a whole. So look, I mean, we're in a place where I think some parts of the world, some markets are have gone, indefinitely hybrid for the foreseeable future. So the level of preparation, some folks are doing it right, some folks are doing it really well, but there are others that we've seen kind of fall back into the old ways, right? So and unfortunately, history has a way of repeating itself, and I think what you and I saw here was an opportunity to really think about, okay, what were what lies beneath this particular global let's say macroeconomic challenge that we face, especially in again in your part of the world for sure, but I think with the global supply chain and everything that is all really interconnected, just like our agents, there's a big impact, and nobody is really immune to what could happen. So
do you think we're better prepared now? Because last time when we had that mass work from home side of things, contact centers were pretty much caught flat-footed. Agents went home with whatever gear they had, and We had all different variations of headsets and, desktops and people working off ironing boards, and the result was that calls degraded. Customer experience was terrible. 3-4 years later, have we actually solved it, or have we just forgotten about it?
I would say that, you're probably, I don't want to go middle of the road, but I can think of many occasions, even contact centers that we work with today, in making sure they have the right tools to do their job, regardless of the macroeconomic situation. They still struggle with working from home, right? Whether it's the proper bandwidth, the proper machine, the management policy that runs over top of it, all that kind of stuff. Um, some people, again, some people do it really well, but I have seen, just as many people do it bad or terribly, as who do good. So I wouldn't say that I think we're prepared as an industry to spot the trend or the change or the demand to work from home, or the need to work from home rather, right? But I think there's also uh, a good segment of contact center operators that have taken their eye off the prize and are looking towards some of the new shiny things, um, such as agentic self-service, whether it's voice or chat, looking for growth there rather than preparedness in a fallback to and work from kind of a mandated work from home environment.
So what does go wrong when agents work from home? What are some of those things, Matt?
When what does go wrong, let's let's say what consistently goes wrong. I think there's two categories. So what goes wrong when you have a hybrid work environment or an agent that works from home consistently? The nature of that connection is that it's a contended network that you operate on. So you're using the internet, you're using Wi-Fi, the kids are streaming Netflix,
Right.
the neighbor down the street is mining Bitcoin. Like you never know what's going on, but it truly is contended, right? And you can't control that. So that's the constant struggle, like at the very highest in simplified level that an agent would face today, just in network quality. That doesn't even get down to the hardware or the software that's running on that machine or in the cloud. So that's all very important. But when an agent comes home, or from an unexpected event or an unexpected mandate, that network could be completely unready, right? We've seen some scenarios where um, agents are using things like Starlink or mobile hotspots because they have to, right? So that's their only form of connectivity. So the level of preparedness can go from somebody that's dealing with contention and mismanaged hardware and software to completely unprepared, no wireless, no Ethernet cable at home. Heck, you mentioned people working from ironing boards. I mean, that's a real thing. I've got 4 kids, and when they come home from school, I got to figure out a way to make myself scarce.
Yeah. Well, yeah, noisy environments, right? That's another one. I mean, right now, my neighbors are doing some landscaping on their front lawn, and like it's noisy, and I'm hoping that some of the tech that can hopefully keep some of that noise out of this conversation. So, these are real issues. So, Matt, what do you think that better actually looks like? If we think about, what are the core, if we think about like that core value of a conversation, and we move from what the problem is and we start to look at what is the solution, what does better actually look like?
I mean, so I think better really looks, and you have to look at arming your agents or those that might work from home, even in a hybrid scenario, with the tools that they need to do their job. And they got a hard enough job already, right? As an agent, you can suffer from customer abuse on a daily basis. You are not technical in nature. Um, Lots of times we like to think our agents are technical, but 9 times out of 10, we don't have that luxury. So how do we help them do their jobs better, especially when it relates to just the baseline, making sure that the tools and the network that supports them, and even the support infrastructure behind it are ready to help them through it. So being aware or being delivered kind of real-time awareness to what's going on in your environment is a really great first start, right? So, selfishly, you would want to look at something like an observability tool that provides kind of a Copilot experience where you're notifying an agent proactively or in real time that you notice some sort of degradation, right?
So that's, I mean, you raise an interesting point, and I think if we sort of bring this back to the human aspect of that, and one of the things I've been sort of talking about a lot as I travel around the world and what I'm writing about is that a lot of the problems that we see within contact centers around our agents is not in their DNA, it's actually at the desktop. And when we start to look at this from an agent perspective and what is their experience, when things technically go wrong on a call, agents get flustered. They're trying to handle not only the customer query and their emotions and all that sort of stuff, but they're also dealing with things like degraded audio and technical stuff, and that adds cognitive load. And empathy disappears when that happens, and the call suffers, and the customer experience suffers. And we go through this entire process. And something you mentioned before, like around, we think people are technical. Like, I used to think I was pretty technical and pretty tech savvy. And I kind of hear, when I hear those words now, I'm like, if someone's saying tech savvy, they're actually not. But things are moving so fast, and as someone who works in a tech startup and tries to be leading with tech, I still feel like I'm constantly catching up and struggling to keep up with the rate of change. So when you're talking about agents who are primarily just focused on trying to deal with a customer and a customer inquiry, they don't always have that time to upskill around some of that stuff. So, it's really interesting. It's really interesting in that space. So you talked about Agent Copilot before, a little bit around that being able to do that real-time stuff. And is it a nice to have in a controlled environment? Like if we think about like that home network setup and how important that is to
if
get
you think
right.
about, sorry. If you
No,
think
okay.
about how an agent, like what we're asking agents to do, right? We're asking
Yeah.
you to go home and adhere to this committed schedule that you have agreed to, right? You go on breaks when we say that you're going
Yeah.
to, and effectively be your first and even in some cases second line of defense.
Yeah.
You're used to, if you're in the office or you're in in a brick and mortar building with a bunch of other agents, gone are the days of that kind of quick collaboration, right?
Yeah. True.
You are connected through like Teams or any kind of like real-time
Yeah.
collaboration tool, but it's really not the same.
Yeah.
So you feel like you're on an island as an agent, right?
Yeah.
So I'm at home and I'm working, even in a hybrid scenario, when you're in the office, 2 or 3 days a week, you're on your own. So especially when you work from home, those Copilot tools are a necessary element to a modern agent, right? So if you want
Yeah. Right.
to deliver high degrees of customer satisfaction, keep your agents happy so they can take care of what that particular customer needs. And I'm not just talking about the technical Copilot elements as it relates to, voice quality and network performance, and are you using the right inputs and outputs? It's also things like, real-time transcription and the summarization and guidance and all that kind of stuff. That is a necessary element if you want to compete, if you want to have a center of excellence when it comes to your contact center.
I suppose the same problems are always there, right? The same upstream challenges are always there, whether you're from home or you're in the office. and then what that means, like you said, the transcription. If you can't hear the audio and that's not getting transcribed, then that you think about the impact that has on an agent's quality, for example, if they're doing like automated quality. We did a study not that long ago on this stuff, and I was talking to our data scientist here, and I thought one of the cool and really interesting things that he was able to see in the data was that people who had poor MOS values were 50% more likely to leave in the next 3 months. And then MOS, do you want to explain MOS? You probably do a better job of this than I do.
I mean, it's a measure that's been around for a very long time, but it stands for mean opinion score. So it's effectively a statistical measure of latency, jitter, and packet loss. So effectively, all the things that make up a quality voice interaction. That is what MOS is meant to score.
Hey, I knew you'd do a better job, mate. So the idea, I was like, when we looked into that, when I asked our data scientists, like, so what? It was then like, what's the upstream impacts that that's happening? And it was the fact that they had high CPU, and that high CPU was then causing the transcription loss, and then that was flowing through to their quality, and then agents who had 30% of their quality scores as being unsatisfactory were likely to leave in the next 3 months. And I was like, man, that's wild. Like, and I can understand that from an agent's point of view, because it's like, okay, well, if I'm trying my best and I feel like I'm struggling against the system to do that, the pressure and the stress that causes, I'm just out of here, because you're fighting against something you can't fix. And I was like, oh man, that's really interesting when we start to put like the technical layer over something like agent burnout and attrition. That, again, coming back to that idea that not all bad behavior, or what we perceive as bad behavior, is a DNA issue. It's actually a desktop issue. And I thought that was super interesting, and why this is probably so important, and why I wanted to talk to you about it. So if we think forward, right? If we start thinking forward and we try and add value to anyone who's watching this and listening, how do we future-proof this? What should ops leaders be doing right now from a practical and an actionable point of view? Even if the fuel crisis never comes to full fruition, right? We're already working in hybrid. Hybrid is pretty much the norm for a lot of places. Like the state I live in actually mandated it, that you couldn't force someone back for more than 3 days. And so we do live in a hybrid world now, which I think is good, and hopefully offers some more flexibility. So I don't think, maybe the question isn't if you've got if you have distributed agents. It's more about like, when this next operational shock hits, what should they be ready for?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I just wanted to circle back on one point that I think is a unique way to think about a traditional measure. So we just got done talking about MOS, right? MOS by itself is again a measure that's been around for probably for longer than 15 years, probably.
Okay.
Since I was aware of it when I was in uni. Like it's been around for a very long time, right? Basically, ever since Ford was a thing, it was there.
Yeah.
So if we take that, it's not incredibly interesting for those that are listening to us right now, but what we do, or what we're talking about doing, is a new take on the so what. So what does MOS cause? What does it cause from an outcome? And that's what I think you really need to look at in this world where we're gathering all this data, is finding those correlations. So the correlation that you just made about, MOS ultimately can drive attrition, like poor MOS can drive attrition. Like that's, how do you get from point A to point B? Like that's really cool. But I think it's important to not discount those metrics that have been around for a while. So to come,
Absolutely not. And if we think about like there was a couple of studies done by University of Southern California and then University of New South Wales, I think. If I'll double check on that, but they basically do these studies on audio quality and being able to, the trust value that lines up with audio quality, and basically when you have poor audio, then people lose trust in what you're saying. And there's some really cool studies which we can probably tag in comments and things like that. But again, going back to your point, like this baseline measure that's been around forever does have some meaning to it. And I mean, for myself, when I was running contact centers, MOS wasn't really something that I paid a lot of attention to, and maybe I should have.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and speaking of just things that you need to be paying attention to, when we talk about a more focused migration of agents with a permanent work from home setup, one of the things that we didn't have previously, but we do now, is the data surrounding audio quality and performance. Right. So those granular pieces of data when COVID hit, as far as audio quality or network quality, the high level measures were there, but they weren't memorialized in a way that was easily translated to kind of a health check when your agents go home, right? So we were here, now we are there, and we just arrived at that point with a bunch of terrible metrics, right? Like they were bad regardless of if you had the history or you don't. But what I think is really important is if you don't have that baseline today, you need to make sure that you're capturing that and memorializing it in some form or fashion. And if you do have a hybrid environment, that stare and compare between what's going on the days that the agents go home versus the days that they're in the office. And it's not even a productivity lens. It may ultimately be that, but to your point, like the interesting thing is, maybe it's not a behavioral challenge that they face, right? Maybe it's not a behavioral challenge that contact center faces, and when their agents go home, they're just cats away, or cats away, mice will play kind of thing. Maybe that's not it. It's possible that you've got poor network or contended network, or there's something that changes when you go home, other than your physical location, that you don't have line of sight to. So making sure that you have a before and after picture would be really interesting to keep. And if you don't have it today, definitely start keeping it. And what are your plans for that time, right? So when your agents go home, how do you monitor?
Do you do that does that baseline audio quality happen that data, does it happen at a per agent level or a per location level?
Well, I mean, it effectively should be both. If you have the per agent level, you should be able to aggregate the per location. That's ultimately what you need. At the very least, a per location, but you'd be doing yourself a disservice if you didn't look at the individual agent.
Yeah. So do you think it's then worth testing things like that work from home policy under load? Not just with one or two agents, but like a full team, like just testing that. Is that something that you'd recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I would even go further than a full team. A full team or a pod may not be enough volume to stress whatever configuration you have set forth for that kind of work from home contingent. So if there is a way, to quote unquote surprise or reward your agent base with kind of a test run of work from home, you feel like you're ready. I think there's a stepwise approach to it. Just like anything, you gotta kind of take a measured approach, but just kind of a small segment is not enough to exercise the policies and technology that you have in place.
And hardware as well, right? I mean, hardware is technology, but that hardware as well, I think also plays a part.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, it depends on how you're managing that hardware, but something that could be performant in the office. Well, it's a really great example is we've got a customer that had a hybrid workforce, and actually the inverse of what you would expect happened, where when the set of agents came into the office, they had noticed a degraded level of performance, right? So audio quality was poor, high CPU utilization, like what was going on? Well, what had happened was the desktop team was utilizing their time in office to push updates and patches and firmware upgrades during the working hours. So the agent would come in, and while they were, trying to serve the customer base, the desktop team wasn't communicating to the contact center or to the network guys
Yep.
what they were doing.
I've
we
had the same.
we help the customer
I've
cover that,
worked in
but, like,
contact centers. Yeah, I've worked in contact centers when that happens, and you sit there scratching your head, going, "Why is everything so slow?" And the frustration, even just like switching a tab, it can be so. If that's slow, like it's a bit like traffic. Like when you're driving in traffic, if you've got flowing traffic and then someone jams on the brakes, then that just backs up for kilometers and kilometers. It's the same in that contact center. So, mate, that's a great example. Yeah, really good example. Shoot. All right. So, mate, I think it's been a pretty good chat, and I think we touched on a fair bit of stuff. Like, we talked about. I think, yeah, you touched on some really cool stuff, like the thought that, when agents are at home, they feel more isolated, and particularly when things go wrong, they don't have the ability to tap someone on the shoulder. So what do we do with that? We talked about Agent Copilot, and that's not so much as a needing a tool for tool's sake, but it actually provides confidence to an agent and helps them feel supported. Not just by their team or whatever, but also like just from their tech stack. They feel like they can have confidence in that. And we know, from that data I was talking about, if you don't, then we can see that lead to attrition, which I think is super interesting. And I think we should dive in more at some point. So let's think about what are the takeaways? So I think where this sort of all stemmed from, and why I thought this would be timely and interesting, is the work from home readiness side of things. I think a lot of organizations think about this as a contingency plan, but I think there's a baseline capability that everyone needs to be able to have. And I think, if I hear what you were saying, it's really that visibility into an agent's environment that can't be a negotiable. We have to be able to see that, and that the agent Copilot is what do you call it? A force multiplier? Is that what you said? When
I
when
think
those
I
conditions
probably
are.
used that term before, but I mean, the thought that I was having, Luke, is we're talking about going back and and working from home. We've been here before, but what also is, I guess, two real points is, if you can do this as a contact center operator and do it well, it becomes a differentiator when you go to hire new talent, right? Your retention goes up. The Glassdoor feedback potentially elevates. Like, I've got an amazing machine, highly performant solution. Like, I've got all the tools I need to do my job, to do this really stressful but important job. So I'm that pressure relief valve. An agent doesn't need to worry about they can just worry about doing their job rather than being first line tech support, etc. Not only that, as the differentiator, but when we talk about the macro economy, and the stress that can be incurred by a family unit or an individual that in some cases may not have a great level of income, or they may not be in an amazing financial situation, they now have to deal with the world, right?
Yeah.
So if you can create an environment that is, that arms your agents and your workforce with all the tools needed, they can come to work, make their money, make customers happy, and not have to worry about anything else, right? They got enough to worry about at home. The challenges with right now with either gas prices, shortages. How do you deal with that? Heck, I mean, even inflation, right? It's wild what's going on right now. So
Yeah.
if you can put yourself in a position to be, as stress-free or low friction for your agents as you can be, that can be a differentiator. People will want to come to work because they don't have to deal with, the typical woes that an agent might have to. So, uh, I just wanted to say that before I forgot, because I was like, there's a really good kind of parallel between, we don't just bring up the gas shortage just to talk about a hot topic. There's real
Yeah.
correlation there.
Yeah. Yeah. And this goes to that idea that the baseline is do no harm to your employees, right? Like don't make anything worse off. But what we're talking about here is that's a pretty terrible baseline. Do no harm. Like there's so much going on. How do we make their lives better by coming to work? And if that is maybe a better machine, whether it's just not having to deal with that friction where they would have to otherwise deal with that in other workplaces, I think that's one way to kind of step from being the do no harm to being a better workplace. And I definitely pinched that ideation from Tim Buzzer, who's just really big on workplace flexibility and things like that. But I think that, I love his thinking around that. And I think that what you're talking about really speaks to that as well. So yeah, mate, good call out. Good call out. This has been fun. Hopefully everyone has if you've still been watching up until now, thanks. Awesome. That's all. We really appreciate you taking the time, and I hope you found that interesting. I'm assuming if you're this far in, you probably did. It'd be remiss of us probably not to talk about if you are curious about sort of what we do and how we can help with some of this stuff. We'll drop a link in the comments and the likes to things like our operator agent experience and the resources around that. And if you want to get an assessment, by all means, reach out. We can do that too. And man, I hope we have more of these chats, man. I like hanging out with you. I like your views on things. Although you are kind of the technical guy, I think you kind of steered more into some of that human stuff than I did. And I think that's what I love about you.
Probably took some of those words right from some of our discussions, but yeah, I'm thrilled. I think that we've got a good lineup for what's coming. Great thought about some of the what's next topics, and it's it's only going to kind of roll and snowball into something better. So,
Sure.
As I always say, man, I like to think a glass half full, and that's what we're doing here.
Love that. Cool. Well, let's wrap there. Until next time. And as always, hooroo.